The time the cameras cut, the energy in the studio had shifted dramatically. The audience's applause was still ringing in Simone's ears, and the buzz of excitement was palpable. It was clear, she had not only held her own, but she had completely turned the tables on Charlene Whitaker, the woman known for cutting down guests with a sharp tongue. Simone sat back in her chair, her calm composure never faltering, but inside, she felt a rush of pride. She had done exactly what she came to do. She had stood her ground, and in doing so, she had delivered a message far beyond the show's typical entertainment value. Her words, powerful, honest, and unapologetic, would reverberate long after the cameras stopped rolling. As the live broadcast came to an end, the crew began to scatter, but a few lingered, offering nods of approval and congratulations. Some were still buzzing from the exchange. The producers had been quiet, but Simone could see the respect in their eyes. Charlene, on the other hand, had become a picture of strained professionalism. She forced a tight smile and a few more words of acknowledgement toward Simone, but the venom that had once defined her interviews was gone. For the first time, the interviewer had met her match, and it was clear that the audience was on Simone's side. Backstage, Simone was greeted by her team, their faces glowing with excitement. They had watched the entire interview, and they knew what it meant. This moment, this victory, wasn't just about a single exchange of words, it was a triumph for the countless women who would benefit from her program, the ones she had fought so hard for. Simone wasn't done yet, though. She knew this moment would spark new conversations, perhaps some criticism, but also much-needed dialogue on topics that often went ignored. The interview had given her platform a new level of visibility. And that visibility would be used to keep pushing forward. Pushing for more opportunities, for more access, for more inclusivity. Simone's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her mentor, a woman who had shaped much of her entrepreneurial journey. That was everything. The world needed to hear that. Proud of you. Now, don't let them forget it. Simone smiled, tucking the phone away. Her response was simple but reflected everything she had come to realize, it's just the beginning. As she stepped into the waiting car, Simone felt the weight of the moment sink in. This wasn't about winning against Charlene, though it certainly felt like a victory. This was about ensuring that the doors she had fought to open remained wide, and that the next generation of young black women, women like the ones she mentored, could step through them without fear, without hesitation, and with every opportunity in front of them. And so, as the sun began to set over Los Angeles, Simone Jackson leaned back in her seat, her heart full of resolve. She had shown the world that, sometimes, the sharpest tongues could be silenced not by anger, but by the undeniable strength of truth. The time they returned, the room was still buzzing with energy. The tension that had hung thick between Simone and Charlene had not dissipated. It lingered, crackling in the air, like the aftershocks of an earthquake. As the segment concluded, Charlene's final words were drowned out by applause from the audience. Simone had done it. She had stood her ground, dismantled every challenge with poise, and turned the tables in a way no one had expected. For the first time in a long while, Charlene had met her match, and the world had watched it unfold live. The producers wrapped things up quickly, the cameras cutting away from Charlene's strained smile, shifting to a glowing Simone, who was greeted backstage by high fives and pats on the back from the crew. They knew they had just witnessed something historic. Simone had not just defended her program, but also exemplified what it meant to rise above adversity, to confront injustice with unwavering strength and intellect. Simone's phone buzzed almost immediately after she left the studio. Messages from friends, supporters, and people who had been watching the show flooded her inbox. The overwhelming consensus was clear: Simone had become a symbol of resilience, grace, and empowerment. Social media lit up in a firestorm of support. Hashtags like #SimoneJackson, #GraceUnderFire, and #LiftingAsWeClimb began trending within minutes. People shared clips of her interview, discussing the power of her words, her quiet yet firm insistence on change, and the undeniable confidence that came through every time she spoke. Charlene Whitaker, once seen as a powerful figure, had been outshone, and it was clear to many that the real power lay not in her words, but in Simone's unyielding belief in her cause. In the days that followed, Simone's program received an outpouring of donations, applications, and partnerships. Even the media, once skeptical of her initiative, began reaching out to cover the impact it was having on young black women across the country. But despite all the accolades, Simone remained grounded. She knew that the work wasn't done. For every victory, there were more battles to be fought. Her mission was far from complete, but in that moment, she had shown the world just how powerful it could be when you refuse to back down. And as for Charlene, she may have had the last word on camera, but the true lesson was clear to all who watched: words were only as powerful as the truth behind them. And when the truth stood tall and unwavering, even the sharpest tongue couldn't cut it down. Simone left the studio that day not just as an entrepreneur, but as a force to be reckoned with. An icon for a new generation that believed in the power of lifting others up, in recognizing the unseen struggles, and in never, ever backing down. As the weeks passed, Simone's life took on a new rhythm. The demands on her time grew exponentially as the media spotlight continued to shine brightly on her initiative. Interviews, meetings, and speeches filled her calendar, and yet, she remained focused on the heart of her work, empowering young black women to break through societal barriers and pursue their dreams. One morning, as she sat in her office reviewing plans for an upcoming mentorship program, her assistant knocked gently on the door. "Simone, you've got a call from the White House." Simone paused, her pen hovering above the papers in front of her. The White House? She hadn't been expecting any calls of such magnitude. "Put them through," she said, her voice steady but betraying a flicker of curiosity. The phone rang, and Simone picked it up. A calm, authoritative voice greeted her on the other end. "Ms. Jackson, this is Veronica Thompson from the Office of Public Engagement. We've been following your work closely and would like to discuss the possibility of partnering on an initiative aimed at addressing the economic disparities facing black women in business. Would you be available for a conversation?" Simone's heart skipped a beat. She knew the weight of this call. An opportunity like this could be a game changer, not just for her, but for countless women who had long been overlooked in the business world. After a brief conversation and some logistical details, Simone arranged a meeting at the White House. As she hung up the phone, a sense of awe settled over her. The journey that had started with a simple idea to help young women in her community was now expanding on a national stage. She knew, deep down, that this was a pivotal moment. One that could push her cause even further and make a tangible difference in the lives of so many. The meeting at the White House came and went, but the impact would be felt for years to come. Simone found herself sitting across from policymakers, government officials, and community leaders, people who once seemed far removed from her everyday reality. The conversation was productive, with ideas flowing freely about how to build sustainable business opportunities, improve access to funding for women of color, and implement policies that would close the gaps in education and career advancement for marginalized groups. Simone left the meeting with a deep sense of pride. Not only had she contributed to shaping the conversation on a national level, but she had also secured a commitment for federal support for her initiative. The following week saw the launch of a new partnership between her organization and several government agencies, bringing her mission to an even larger audience. But with this newfound influence came a greater responsibility. The challenges of balancing her growing platform with her personal life became increasingly difficult. Simone found herself constantly on the move, attending events, speaking engagements, and meetings. Despite her success, she struggled to find time for the things that once grounded her: quiet moments at home, dinners with friends, and the time to reflect on her journey. One evening, as she stared at her reflection in the mirror after another long day, Simone realized something. She had built a platform, created a movement, and inspired so many, but in the process, she had almost lost herself. It was time to reset, to take a step back and reconnect with the core values that had driven her in the first place. With that in mind, Simone took a brief hiatus. She canceled several engagements and spent more time with her family and close friends, grounding herself in the very community she had been fighting for. This time away allowed her to reflect, to reassess, and to rediscover the pure joy that had first sparked her mission. When she returned, Simone did so with renewed energy and a sharper focus. Her organization flourished even further, reaching new heights and helping thousands of young women who were ready to take the leap into business. But now, Simone knew, it was about more than just the work. It was about ensuring that the next generation would rise with confidence, strength, and a deep understanding of their worth. Her partnership with the White House continued to grow, and her program became a model for other initiatives across the country. Simone Jackson was no longer just an entrepreneur. She was a leader, an advocate, and a trailblazer who had proven that one person, one voice, could spark a nationwide movement. And as she stood before the crowds, sharing her story and her vision for a better future, Simone felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had fought for what she believed in, faced down critics, and dismantled every barrier in her path. But more than that, she had never lost sight of the people she was fighting for, the women who looked to her not just for inspiration, but for proof that dreams, no matter how big, could be realized. Simone Jackson had carved her place in history, and the world was watching as she led the charge toward a future where equity, opportunity, and respect were no longer ideals, but realities for every woman. Simone's impact continued to ripple outward, influencing industries far beyond what she had ever imagined. As the national conversation around racial equity in business gained momentum, more organizations reached out to collaborate with her, seeking her expertise and insights. She became a sought-after keynote speaker, invited to global summits where leaders from all sectors discussed solutions to social inequality. Her partnership with the White House had opened doors she once thought were beyond her reach, but even as she navigated these new heights, Simone remained grounded. She never forgot her roots. The young women she had mentored, the small community businesses she had supported, and the countless people who had believed in her when she was just a woman with an idea were always at the forefront of her mind. Yet, amid this whirlwind of success, there were moments of doubt. The weight of her role, her new identity as a national figure, sometimes felt overwhelming. There were days when she wondered if she could continue to balance her personal life with the needs of a growing empire. It was during one of these moments of self-reflection that she received a call from Charlene Whitaker, the talk show host who had once tried to undermine her on live television. "Simone, I know we've had our differences, but I've been watching what you've been doing. I want to make things right," Charlene said, her voice softer than it had been during their heated interview. Simone hesitated. The wounds from that day hadn't completely healed, but there was something genuine in Charlene's tone. Perhaps this was an opportunity for healing, not just for them, but for the broader conversation about race, media, and the way public figures are treated. "I'm listening," Simone replied, her voice steady but open. Charlene explained that she had been approached by her producers to do a special segment about women of color in business. She wanted Simone to appear as the centerpiece of the show, but more than that, she wanted to ensure that the conversation would be framed with respect, without any of the confrontational tactics that had defined their earlier encounter. Simone considered it for a moment. This wasn't just about her, but about the broader message. She saw the potential to use the platform to highlight the work she was doing, and perhaps, more importantly, to shift the narrative in media about how black women were represented. "I'll do it," Simone said, finally making up her mind. The show aired a few weeks later, and what followed was nothing short of transformative. The interview with Charlene was nothing like their first interaction. It was respectful, insightful, and candid. They discussed the challenges Simone had faced in her journey, the obstacles that still stood in the way of many women of color in business, and how society needed to change. Simone was honest about the toll that her success had taken on her, but she also emphasized the importance of creating spaces where black women could thrive without apology. The interview was widely praised, not just for the content, but for the way it demonstrated growth and reconciliation. In a way, it symbolized the possibility of mending the divide between people who had once been adversaries, an example of how two people could work together to elevate a cause greater than their individual differences. As Simone looked back at her journey, from the challenges she had faced as a young woman in business to becoming a leading voice in the fight for racial equity, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The work was far from over, there were still battles to be fought, still gaps to close, and still voices that needed to be heard. But Simone had learned something important: progress was not a linear path. It was filled with setbacks, unexpected alliances, and moments of profound transformation. Simone's organization continued to grow, providing mentorship, funding, and resources to thousands of women of color across the country. Her impact extended beyond the corporate world. She was now shaping policy, influencing culture, and inspiring a new generation of leaders who would continue the work she had started. And as she stood in front of a packed auditorium at one of her many speaking engagements, Simone looked out at the sea of eager faces before her. She saw the hope and determination in their eyes, the same hope that had driven her years ago when she first decided to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. "This," she said, her voice strong and resolute, "is just the beginning. We are creating a new world, a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, no matter their race, their gender, or their background. We will keep fighting for equality, for justice, and for the promise that everyone, no matter their circumstances, can achieve their dreams." The audience erupted in applause, but Simone's mind wandered to the faces of the young women she had mentored, those she had lifted up and who, in turn, were now lifting others. This wasn't just her victory. It was theirs too. As the applause echoed in her ears, Simone felt a quiet confidence settle in her heart. The road ahead would be challenging, but with every step, she knew she was not walking alone. She had created a legacy, one that would endure for generations to come. And she was just getting started.